Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Mondays with Michelle video. This week, we'll talk about watermen, those individuals who worked and lived on canal boats. We'll look at several websites and discuss some of the records available that can add to our knowledge of their lives. Let's get started. The first website we're going to look at is the Yorkshire Waterways Heritage Society. And as you can see from their homepage, the goal of this website is to illuminate the lives of the hardworking watermen who plied their trade on the waterways of 19th and 20th century Yorkshire. And this website has a number of interesting resources. One of the main features that will be a real help to genealogists is their canal boat registration database, and I'll show you that a little bit later. They also have some information on various research projects that they've done. One of them to do with analyzing all of the Watermen entries for Yorkshire in the 1881 census. They've also done some detailed family history research on a number of Watermen families. They've done 20 families so far. And they've also looked at marriage records for some of the watermen to come up with some statistics on the literacy rate for the watermen. There is a section on news and volunteer projects, and if you have ancestors who are watermen, you may be interested in participating in some of these projects. And we'll talk about those a little bit later. So let's take a look at what these menus offer. If we go into our society page and scroll down, we'll see a little bit of history about the society. And this group came about when the Yorkshire Waterways Museum in Goole was closed in 2019. So some of the museum volunteers formed the Yorkshire Waterways Heritage Society. And their main goal is to educate the public in the history and heritage of the waterways. If we go to the Support Us link, you can find out how you can either donate to the society, or if you choose to be a member, you could join the society. That might be something you're interested in if you have ancestors who were involved in canal boats. Under this volunteer opportunities, we'll take a look at these three links. So one of the society's projects involves scanning photographs, cataloging, and sorting the vast collection of material held by the late Brian Masterman. Mr. Masterman was a historian who had all kinds of material relating to the heritage of Goole and Old Goole, so that may be of interest. They've also got a project on the go, which is their historic photograph collection, and what they're hoping to do is to be able to identify where these photographs were taken and geocode them with coordinates so that they can link them to a map and have like an interactive map with photos of the area. This last one, Community History Project, sounds very interesting. Their goal is to identify, record, and map all of Yorkshire's watermen wherever and whenever they might be found in the county, so that they can have a permanent record or memorial to these people. So as part of that, they have been doing some research on these families. And right now on this website, they've got details on about 20 families, I believe, but they also have a huge database of information. And that's what we're going to take a look at now under this research link. So if we go to research and click Canal Boat Register, we're taken to an information page which has some background details on the Canal Boats Act and background on the actual Canal Boat Register. So there are some comments and notes as to what you might find in the Canal Boat Register, the type of information that you could expect to find in their database. And at the very bottom of the screen, we have a help button, which will give you a sample of a typical image, and a link to search the register. So we're going to search the register. And this is what the register entries look like, your search results. So if I now want to search for a particular individual, I would click on this magnifying glass. And in this little pane that pops out, you can see we can search on any of these pieces of information. But I'm going to search on master, and I'm going to say, give me all the entries that contain my surname of Renton. And when I've typed it in, I need to either tab off the field or press enter. And I can see it's got my search term there. And now I click the blue search button at the bottom of the pane. And I have a match. There is one entry. And if we look at the information available, it says the authority, Goole. It gives me the registration number, the vessel name, which is Water Queen, the date it was registered. And it says the owner's names and the master of the boat. So if I want to see more details of that entry, I would click on it. And this is what it's telling me. So some of the same information that we saw in that summary, but it also tells me the route that the canal boat followed. So they operated on the Ayr and Calder canals. It says towed by horse or tug, and that it's a wide boat. It wasn't used as a fly boat. It had 2 cabins, and there were 5 persons allowed maximum on the boat. And I'm going to remove my search criteria. So let's look back at the entire list. And if we take a look at some of the other entries just to compare. So here we have an entry from Huddersfield. So this says what they were moving, and it was towed by horse. 1 cabin, 3 adults, and it gives some details about what the boat looked like. In addition to the Canal Boat Register, what they have done is actually analyzed the Watermen entries in the 1881 census. I have a one-name study, and you're always looking at how can you make sense of this large volume of data and what kind of trends can we see. I found it very interesting that they had quantified all of these entries from the 1881 census. Let me just make the screen a bit bigger. So these would have been all of the individuals that were associated with households where the occupation of the person in the household was waterman. So they've got 3,231 individuals. And they said how many were living ashore the night of the census. So these would have been the ones that were on the boat up above. Now we've got another 4,428 that were on shore. They've got another 59 that were in different institutions. And then they did a breakdown showing the age of the masters on board the keel. I thought it was interesting. You had one 80-year-old individual, 80 and over. You had 5 that were 75 to 79. So when you look at those bottom 3 lines, that's 14 masters that were at least 70 years old. And again, looking at the age of the watermen, there were 16 of them that were over 80. So they weren't necessarily masters of the boat, but they were watermen. And they did an analysis on where they were born, and now the breakdown by county, and showing the birthplace versus where the nearest river and canal was, and now number of families. So I found this analysis was really quite interesting. And they also did some work to link the level of literacy compared to the national average. And they looked at marriages for some of the watermen families. And I thought this was really interesting when you look at the comparison to what the national average was. So when the national male illiteracy average was 40%, before 1800, for the watermen that they looked at, the literacy rate for the groom and the bride was 100% illiterate. Of those, I think it was 170 entries they looked at. And again, when the illiteracy rate was 33% for males, it was an illiteracy rate of 53% for grooms, 80% for brides. So it's interesting to see by the time you're getting into the early 1900s, late 1800s, you still had a 33% illiteracy rate for grooms, 30% for brides. And at that point, the national average for both males and females was 3%. And post 1900, it was still 10%. So again, it's interesting sometimes to see when you look at what was happening nationally with education and literacy, it's interesting to see how that played out in this particular career path. If you have watermen in your family tree and you're trying to research them, because of the high illiteracy rates, you may find even more variation on spelling of the surnames and the first names than you would expect. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, let's take a look at this genealogy link. So, as I mentioned, they are trying to ultimately trace all the families of watermen. And this is the kind of information they're putting together. So that kind of family group sheet snapshot. So the names they've got right now, they've got information on the Eyre family, Banks, Bell, Bolton, Campbell-John. So there's quite a few here, Gawthorpe. So you may find that there's some names in here that look familiar. If you have Waterman ancestors or you're interested in doing some research, you can contact the Society. As I said, I found this was an interesting website. The fact that they have that canal registered database, I think is really useful because that prompted me to go looking to see what resources there are in the major websites for Waterman records. Now, there is a website for the Company of Watermen and Lightermen, but it's focusing on the London area. These are those that worked on the River Thames, and that company is still active, and their records are at the Guildhall. If you look at Find My Past, they have in their collection, they have the list of the Watermen. They've got some of the records. So if you have an ancestor who was a Waterman and was working in the London area, then you do have access online to looking at a number of those records. If we take a look at the Family Search Wiki, they do have an information page, and there are some good links. So they talk about the kinds of records. They talk about the River Thames, the London Watermen, but they also mention where you can find records on the different canal boatmen. And there's a few societies mentioned, but what I thought was interesting, I wouldn't have thought to look at railway records, but their comment was a lot of the railroads owned the docks and some of the land around there. So in fact, you'll find mention of a lot of the canal and river boatmen and the watermen in with the railway records. So I thought that was an interesting link. There is another website, the Canal and River Trust. So if we look at canal history, they have a Waterways archive where they have digitized photographs. They also have Waterways Journal. They have information on their museum collection, the National Waterways Museum. And you can search the collection to see what they have. They also have this Unlocking Hidden Stories audio tracks about different aspects of canal life. And they've got, let me just go back a step, this history features and articles. I found there was an awful lot of information on the actual canals. Here's one about the role of the canal watermen and slavery. So this is another really good website that has information if you are trying to research your waterman ancestors. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. Don't forget to download the handout. You'll find the link in the video description at the bottom of your screen. You may need to click more to see the handout links. Thanks for watching.